Today, I want to start a new series on the channel. The first video I did on here was a care guide, and I do plan to do a lot of other care guides on a lot of different species, but I want to vary the channel a little bit, and today's video is going to be a species highlight video. And what this series is going to be is I'm going to look at several different species. Today it's Cuban Knight Anoles, and I'll do it on other species too, but it's basically going to be telling you a little bit about the species and how they're doing in the hobby and where I think they're going to be. It's not going to be a care guide. I will talk about some aspects of the care of the animal, but it's mainly just going to be about where they come from in the wild and what I think their niche is going to be in the hobby. So whether they're going to be good for beginners, good for experts, and whether I think they're going to blow up and become really popular, or whether I think they're going to die down and really be lesser known in the hobby. So like I said, today's species highlight is going to be on Cuban Knight Anoles. And I've known about this species for a really long time. And for the longest time, I think they've been criminally underrated, but luckily now there's sort of been a resurgence in popularity for them. But anyway, they come from Cuba, as it's stated in their name. They are arboreal lizards, arboreal anoles from Cuba, and they're actually the largest species of anole in the whole world. So that's really cool. That means they're going to be a really good size for a pet lizard. It's a size that isn't too small, but it's also a size that isn't too big, and just about anyone can handle them if they are habituated, which we'll get into handleability later on in the video, but they're not really handleable out of the box. You're going to need to work with them. But as for the size, it's a really nice, robust size, and I think it's the perfect size for a pet lizard. It's a little bit bigger than, say, a crested gecko, but it's nothing like as big as a bearded dragon or a blue-tongued skink or anything like that. I think it's a great size. Anyway, being from Cuba, they're gonna need some of the basic care requirements that they're gonna need is they're gonna need a lot of UVB. They're from the tropics, so they're gonna be exposed to the sun a lot. They're gonna need a lot of UVB, definitely essential for these guys, and a lot of calcium supplements. They are gonna need a basking spot of about 100 degrees and a cool spot of about 70 degrees. So 70 to 100 degrees about range. Again, this isn't going to be a care guide, but yeah, that's just basic care requirements. As for housing, an 18 by 18 by 24 could work for these guys. I would honestly recommend something more like a 24 by 24 by 36 for them, because they do get fairly large and they are quite active, especially if you're going to be housing two together, which you can do with this species if you do it properly. That will definitely require at least a 24 by 24 by 36 enclosure. Obviously 24 by 24 by 36 vertically, because they are arboreal lizards, so they're going to favor vertical space over horizontal space, but they will use some horizontal space as well. So yeah, a really solid pet lizard. They have, I'll be putting pictures of them up on screen throughout this video, but they have a vibrant green coloration. They have some great patterns. They have some like rough looking, like textured scales. And I think overall, head to toe, these guys look absolutely fabulous. They're again a great size. They're awesome. They look awesome. Now, like I had mentioned earlier in the video, these guys are criminally underrated. They still don't get a lot of notoriety. A lot of people know about them, know what they are, but they're not popular. Not a lot of people have them. Not a lot of people are breeding them. Actually, I've tried to find a captive bred night anole for like 4 years now, and I have not been able to find one. I know that I've had bad luck with it. Like, I've been on some breeders' waiting lists, and I've gotten notifications that they're back in stock, and then by the time I get around to actually gathering the money together and going to order them, they're sold out again. So that has happened to me a couple times, but really there's not many breeding efforts. Most of them that you're gonna find online, and you will find them readily available online, but most of those, the vast majority, are gonna be wild caught, which isn't as bad as it sounds, because most of that is from Florida, where they're invasive. So it's not too bad, but at the same time, it's going to be an animal that will probably come with parasites and a whole host of other issues that come with imported animals or wild caught animals. And it's just not worth it for me, so I haven't gotten one. Yesterday, I actually ordered one from a reputable breeder on Morph Market, and it's actually a high blue one, and it's a baby, it's a captive bred baby. I'm really excited to set it up in a new enclosure, but for the most part, they're not really readily available. They're very, very underrated. Not a lot of people breed them, not a lot of people keep them, and all in all, they deserve a lot more love. However, I think these guys are going to blow up in the hobby. And that's why I wanted to highlight them in the species highlight, because I want more videos on them to be available. I think the more people find out about them and find out about the different types of Cuban Knight Anoles, which I will be talking about in a minute, the more people are going to fall in love with them, and the more people are going to want to keep them, and the more people are going to breed them. And I think that would be great. I think the main issue with the lack of notoriety of this species in the hobby is exposure. They haven't gotten exposure. There's not many videos on them. There's not many care guides on them. But more importantly, again, there's no one breeding them and nobody wants to keep them, it seems. There are three main things that I think are going to change that and are going to have these guys be one of the next big reptiles in the hobby. Number one is that there has been a shift in the hobby over the past couple of years, over the past few years, that where before people were completely fixated on the handleability of an animal, almost exclusively dictating whether or not they would get that animal. Now, there are a lot more people that keep animals as displays. It's become a lot more popular to have beautiful bioactive enclosures instead of rack systems where you put your snake in, or tubs where you put your snake in and you just take it out to handle it. And that's really the only time you interact with your snake. Well, now there's a lot more people that have beautiful glass enclosures that are bioactive and they're set up beautifully. And a lot of these enclosures, you never even handle the animals. It's all just for viewing the animal. You interact with the animal just by viewing it or feeding it in the enclosure or things like that. And I think that's awesome. I think both are good. Handleable animals are obviously great. And also I think display animals are great. And I think a lot of people are coming around to wanting both, to wanting some handleable animals and wanting some display animals. And since Cuban Knight Anoles are very handleable, they can be pretty feisty and they have some gnarly teeth on them, I think a lot of people just don't want to handle them, and I don't think they want to be handled either. You can habituate them. Again, you can do that with any animal, right? But it's not easy to do with these guys. It requires a little bit more work, and I think a lot of people just aren't willing to do that. And I think that has been one of the reasons why they haven't been showcased a lot, and why a lot of people don't know about them, or they're not interested in them, even if they do know about them. But with this shift into bioactive, beautiful display enclosures, I think that is the niche that these guys are gonna fill. I think you're gonna see a lot of people who can handle them, but I think you're gonna see a lot more people who can handle them and have them as beautiful display animals. Reason number two why I think these guys are going to really pop off is that there are a lot more variations of this species coming into the United States and being bred now than there used to be. Before, there was really only the wild type Cuban Knight Anole, Anoles equestrius, and it just the basic locality morph subspecies, that the green one, right? The one that I've been showing on screen throughout this whole video, and it's again a beautiful animal. But I think part of the reason why a lot of people think it's boring, or why they're not interested in it, is because green anoles are extremely common, and they are, to a lot of people, boring. I think they're great, but to a lot of people they are a very boring reptile, and you do see them everywhere. They're available at pet stores for $5 sometimes, so you know, you can see why people think they are boring. And Knight Anoles are kind of, they resemble just a bigger version of green anoles, and I think they're beautiful, but I guess a lot of people just think they're a little too basic for their taste, right? Now there are a lot more colors in terms of Cuban Knight Anole species, subspecies, morphs, and things like that. There is a lot of variation that is being introduced just now, and we're on the horizon of that. For one, the most popular one seems to be the Blue Beauty Cuban Knight Anoles, and that's a subspecies of Anoles equestris, the Cuban Knight Anole. And they have these beautiful, beautiful blue hues on them mixed with these yellow patternings that I think are awesome. And they are sexually dimorphic, so the males will have more spot-like patterning and the females will have more stripe-like banding. I think that's awesome. And again, you can keep these guys in breeding groups for pretty much full time, so you can see that the difference in their patterns and colors when they're in an enclosure together. I just think it's amazing. I can see what the hype is about, but there is a lot of hype around these guys. Frank Payne is breeding them. A lot of people, Tiki's Geckos seems to be getting into breeding them. Brian Bartrek has talked about them, I think, 3 separate times on his channel, and I think he will definitely get into breeding them in the future by the looks of it. And I think that alone, right, that morph or subspecies of Cuban Knight Anole alone is going to increase the popularity for all Cuban Knight Anoles, because once people find out about that and that kind of blows up, it's going to open the gateway for, well, you know, the Blue Beauties are really expensive, but there's the regular Cuban Knight Anoles and they're really cool. They look pretty similar at the end of the day, and they're cheap. They're dirt cheap. So I think you're going to see people breed that. They're going to have an incentive to breed it. People are going to have an incentive to buy it, and it's going to increase the popularity of it. However, that's not all. There are also a couple of other variations of the Cuban Knight Anole that will add even more popularity to the species. There is a different species of Cuban Knight Anole, Anoles smallwoodi, or the Smallwoods Anole, that is essentially looks like just a regular Cuban Knight Anole, but instead of being green, it's a darker aqua blue color. And they have amazing patternings. And unlike the Blue Beauty Anoles, which I forgot to mention are extremely expensive right now, and the prices will probably come down over time, but right now they're really not affordable. I don't think you're gonna see a lot of casual keepers buy them because of that. However, the Smallwoods Anole is only about $200 whenever they're available. And so you're gonna, if people breed them more, you're gonna see a lot more people buying them. They are a beautiful, beautiful sort of a variation to the Cuban Knight Anole complex, and I think they're gonna become really, really popular. Now, on top of this, there's also a genetic trait in the regular Cuban Knight Anoles that seems to show some blue hues on their skin, and a lot of people are breeding this trait to one another to create bluer and bluer animals, right? So that is somewhat of a morph, right? They're creating somewhat of a morph over time by selectively breeding the bluest animals to the bluest animals. And that's also pretty affordable. The Cuban Knight Anole that I ordered yesterday is actually a high blue Cuban Knight Anole that was bred this way, and it's a captive bred baby, and I only got it for about $200. So that's also a pretty affordable alternative to something like the Blue Beauty Anoles, which I think are getting more notoriety and are gonna blow up. So when a lot of people find out about all these different options for which type of Cuban Knight Anole they can get, and they realize that they're really not hard to take care of, and they're gonna be a beautiful display animal that potentially you could tame down, I think people are gonna go nuts for them. And I think all of the Cuban Knight Anole complex, that whole species, subspecies, morphs, all of that, they're all gonna simultaneously blow up. Lastly, number 3 reason why I think they're gonna blow up is, well, it's something I've already mentioned throughout this video a couple times. A lot of big YouTubers like Brian Bartrek, like Dave Kaufman, they're making videos on the Blue Beauty Anoles specifically, but also on all sorts of different species of Knight Anoles, and they're showcasing, you know, niche Knight Anole breeders like Herptime, for example, who are breeding the species. And I think the more you see that, the more millions and millions of people are exposed to, in the hobby, are exposed to, oh look, this lizard exists and it's really cool. the more they're going to want to seek it out and buy it. And once they become available, I think the market, by the time they become available, because they really aren't very available right now other than wild-caught regular Cuban Knight Anoles, the rest really aren't that available right now. You can only find them in a couple of places. I think by the time they become available, the market will have already been building and it will already be there. The demand will already be there, ready to meet the supply once they start to be bred more and more. And I think breeders will start to breed them more and more once they see that the demand is building. So I think it's all really gonna fall into place at the perfect time. And I do see these guys popping off big time in the hopefully not so far future. Anyway, that's pretty much most of what I wanted to cover. Cuban Knight Anoles, I think they're great, man. I can't wait to get mine, and after about 6 months when I really get a feel for how to take care of them and just some experience with the species, I will also make a care guide on Cuban Knight Anoles and feature mine. But overall, I think it's a great species. I think it deserves the notoriety it's now finally getting, and I certainly hope that I'm right about them popping off in the future. Anyway, I'm gonna try to upload weekly, so if you enjoyed the video, stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next one.